Hey listeners, we're nearing the end of our 15th anniversary fundraising campaign, and we need your help to meet our goal. This campaign offers you a chance to win a unique food and music experience in one of the most exciting cities in America. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and you'll be entered to win dinner for two and 2 tickets to a concert in one of 8 amazing cities: New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and Asheville. All donations support our work educating food system storytellers. And when you donate, you can choose one of those cities and you'll be entered to win dinner and 2 tickets to a show. So help us reach our goal and enter to win dinner and a show in the city of your choice. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Levo. Simple, potent, at-home herbal infusions at the push of a button. Learn more at levooil.com and feed your enthusiasm. That's LEVOOIL.com.
Hello, it's Sam from the Grape Nation. Our show this week is the last show of 2020, and boy, what a year it's been. If you have a chance, please listen to episode 168 with Josh Green, editor and publisher of Wine and Spirits magazine. This is his 4th year on the show, and we discuss 2020, the year in wine. Our episode this week was recorded earlier this year, pre-COVID-19, at the Naples Winter Wine Festival. We talked to some terrific Pinot Noir makers from Oregon. First, Larry Stone from Lingua Franca. Then we speak with Jay Boberg and Jean-Nicolas Mayo from Nicolas-Jay. Enjoy. Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey on the Heritage Radio Network. We are at the Naples Winter Wine Festival, benefiting the Naples Children and Education Foundation. Our guest is Larry Stone, a multi-award-winning master sommelier and educator. Larry has a deep wine history in the finest restaurants. He pursued his dream to make wine and owns a winery now. Larry is the founder of Lingua Franca Wines in Oregon. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Larry.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sam.
Thank you for sitting down with us. I've been meaning to get you on the show, and it was convenient that you were here at Naples, so I made sure that we could sit down. You've been at this a while, but that doesn't mean everybody knows, who you are and what you're doing, and I think the fun part is that you have a very interesting background. So give us a quick background on your journey in life and wine. That got you to, I think, a dream, which is your own winery. And there's a lot of hospitality in there, an MS, to walk me through that.
Well, it was a long journey. It was a journey that started at the beginning of my life when both parents came from families which were very involved in food. My father's family had been bakers in Poland. Part of Poland, it was Austro-Hungary, so it was Hungary at the time, and Austria, I should say, at the time. And then my mother grew up in a village in Romania where they were farmers and had been for many generations as well. But they also made wine. In fact, my mother's maiden name is Weinberger, which means Weinberger is a vineyard owner or vineyard grower. Grape grower, we'd probably say in English, or vigneron in French. Right. So it's a very good name. That's what winemakers are in French. And they made wine, actually. But that was only one of many agricultural products. And my mother didn't emphasize that at all. Despite the family name, she said, "No, I grew up on a farm. We had goats, sheep, we had geese and cattle." And the thing she was most proud of was the thing that her father was probably proud of, which was that he was the town miller, because it was a communal mill, and every farmer who wanted to run the mill had to put a contract in, and the town council had to approve it. But it was a polycultural, multicultural city because of its situation in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So she grew up learning 7 languages when she was, because there were 6 official languages basically in the village she grew up in. If you were a farmer and you wanted to do something like that, you had to know them. And but my dad worked at the Pike Place Market in Seattle, where I grew up. He had emigrated because of the war and fought in the Second World War, like even at the Battle of the Bulge, with
Food related at Pike?
Well, but food at the Pike Place
There are a lot
Market.
of flowers there and other
had trained.
tchotchkes.
No, it was food. No, that's today. Back then it was a farmer's market, and he was actually a high staller. So he bought produce from the farmers and then resold them, which is a business that his mother had in Vienna when he was a kid after the First World War. He helped his mother, and that's how he got the job. And so I was at the market with him. I learned about food. I learned about products, and they had wine at the table at least once a week, and I would try to blind taste it by the time I was 7, because by the time I was 7, my dad joined my uncle. My mother's sister married a gentleman from Sweden who imported Swedish crystals. So they had decanters and wine glasses, and I'd go to their house, and all the bottles of wine had been decanted ahead of time. It was only in a beautiful crystal decanter. I'd say, let me see if I could blind taste. I don't know why. I think I must have seen some film or some TV show where someone was blind tasting, and I thought I could do it because I thought I had a good nose. I started cooking at the time as well. And I could identify the wines pretty soon. I could identify the varietals. I could identify whether they're Old World or New World. But it was a limited set that my parents and my aunt and uncle drank.
That you were exposed to.
Yeah, that I was exposed to.
But you hit the ground running.
But
you were nailing it early?
Yeah, I was nailing it early, so I thought it was funny they let me do it. And that led to making wine when I was 13. And then I went into chemistry in college. And I realized I hated being in a lab because the thing I loved about chemistry was the way things went together. So I loved the theory, and I loved cooking, and I loved wine making. And then, so I went into humanities, and when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, I got my first job as a sommelier. But by that time, I had already lived in Europe. I had a Fulbright scholarship.
Jesus,
and
Larry.
and I was finishing my doctoral dissertation so I could be a professor. I was already an acting instructor. And luckily, a friend of mine who was studying medieval poetry, who had to work as a bartender. I was teaching English and German.
Why are all the medieval poets bartenders?
Right. Well, because there's no one wants it. There's a very limited group of people.
That's right.
So he, but he made a lot of money writing tech books. The original, in the old days, you had books that came with your computer that explained how to run them. So he wrote the manuals for the computers, and he made a fortune with Microsoft, and he retired at age 40. But he regrets that he got me the job as a sommelier. He was a bartender. He said, you could get this job as a sommelier, work less hours, fewer hours, and make more money than teaching full-time, which you're doing at the UW. I was an instructor, an acting instructor at the UW, three classes.
So that guy, that friend, was the transition.
He was a transition.
Now your life
and then
career,
within 4 years,
love.
I became the best sommelier in the United States. And then 6 years later,
These are all competitions, right?
I won the competition of best sommelier in America. And then 2 years after that, I won the title of the best sommelier in the world. So
where does
then
the
and the
MS
same
fit
year I
in at
became
all?
a master sommelier. So I won the title for best sommelier in the world about 2 months after I got the title of I got the diploma of master sommelier, and I was the 9th in America. And
That's
now,
right.
The 9th.
That's worth noting because, I've been doing the show for over 3 years, and I've had a bunch of sommeliers on. But we go back. You were there. What I'm interested about is, once you figured this was your love and you put were all your waking hours studying and tasting? I mean, was it?
Well, I studied more.
The MS, I mean, you were on the ground with practical experience.
Yeah.
But to get the MS.
No, actually, that's kind of embarrassing because, when I was already 12, I told you I made wine when I was 13. By the time I was 13, I'd read Alexis Lechin's Encyclopedia of Wine. I had read Hugh Johnson didn't come out yet, so it was later. But I also read, there were books by Kunke and Maynard Amarine. I read all the college textbooks on wine because, as I said, I already trained in chemistry as a high school student. I was an honor student.
Everything.
I was a high school student. I was a National Merit Scholar. So I read all these books. It was fun. For me, it wasn't serious science. It was applied science, and it was easy for me to understand. And I loved wine, so I wanted to know the difference between the acid structure of a Mosel and a Rhine Riesling, for example. So I studied that, and I studied the panoply of acids in them and the varying percentages, how they related. So when I made my first wine, I already knew that I should have a little more malic acid remaining in the wine than I would if it were from the Rhine. And so
this was all very key to the type of wines you wanted.
Yeah, I loved definition and acid. I loved Loire Valley wines and Chablis and Mosel more than Rhine and Mosel Czar. And so I loved the slatiness, I loved mineral qualities because they were so interesting and unique. And so when by the time I studied for the master test, I had already studied for 2 years.
What year, just for context?
That was 1988.
88.
And I was also I didn't want to take it because that same year was the title for best sommelier in the world. And I was studying for that because I had won the title of best in America.
Your time could only be pointed towards one of those.
That's what I thought.
Right?
Yeah, but then Fred Dame came around. I crossed paths with Fred Dame, and Fred Dame said, "You have to take the masters." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm studying for this thing." And he goes, "You're the best sommelier in America. You've won that award. Why don't you?"
Sounds a little selfish.
And he goes, "You have to show all the other sommeliers, the young sommeliers who are trying to train in the United States now, that it's important to become a master sommelier. You may not pass, but you have to take it." I said, "It's only 3 months from now. I've been training for this French-only exam, and I'm not ready because I don't think I can pass it, because even though I did know more about North American wines and other wines and German wines, and
there's a service aspect and all the other.
Well, I'd been working as a sommelier already, so that wasn't that hard for me. But I was worried about the study, the theoretical aspect, because I didn't train for it. But then I knew I was
like the stuff that you have been just taking in all the.
Well, I have been, and so basically I had 3 months to study to catch up. It was more like review all the things I already knew about the New World, and in 3 months I had the test, and I thought, well, I won't pass, but I'll view it as an opportunity to learn what the test is about, and then I can come back and take it later. But it'll be good training. What I thought in my mind was it would be good training for the World Championship, because the last test I took that I won was 2 years earlier, and so I hadn't taken any tests since then. I was out of the test competition mode.
It's so intense, you just drop it for a while.
Yeah.
Rest your mind.
Well, you just don't think that way.
Right.
A competition is very specific. Knowledge is one thing, but a test or a competition is different. And so I thought, I'll take this test. It'll be good preparation. Just as a test, it's good preparation to get in the mindset of what I have to do in a test. It'll be different questions, but the framework will be the same. And so when I took the test, I was the only one to pass that year. And I think I passed really predominantly because I had no pressure. I didn't think I could pass. I didn't expect to pass. But then the questions, I was lucky. All the questions they asked me, well, not all the questions they asked me I could answer, but the ones I couldn't answer, I just said I can't answer that one. They had to relate to cocktails. I hated cocktails. I didn't want anything to do with cocktails. But I had to know a few I knew, and I knew a few, but I couldn't answer the detailed question. But about the theory of how you make maceration versus infusion.
People don't realize
things like
for
that.
an MS you have to go beyond wine to other beverages.
Yeah, and we had cigars too at that time.
Right.
Cigars were fun.
No
for
more?
me. No, we don't do that anymore. But back
Because
then,
you can't smoke anywhere.
yeah, we had to do Cuban cigars too, even though we couldn't smoke Cuban cigars. But it was really about Cuban because all the examiners were English. It was based on the English test. No deviation, so we had to do exact, and it was the first time it was given in the United States, so we had the same questions they had in England, when it focused a lot on service of cigars, knowledge of cigar pagos, and the different growing regions in Cuba, and the different shades, and the vitellos, and all that.
That's interesting. One of the things you didn't talk about, you talked about all the competitions in the MS. You were heavily involved in hospitality.
Yes.
Tell me, take me chronologically through, while you were doing all this, you were on the floor of some of the best and most interesting places.
Well, yes. In Seattle, when I started, I started off at a great restaurant which is on the waterfront, and we did almost 800 covers a night with sailors, businessmen, all sorts of walks of life. It wasn't very expensive, but they had the most extensive wine list in the region in Seattle, and it was international. And the owner had been a sommelier, and so he had 6 different wine glasses.
Wow!
And it was an amazing.
Ahead of his time.
We had way ahead of his time. We had a Cruvenet machine, the first one west of the Mississippi. The mayor of Seattle came to inaugurate it. We weren't far from City Hall, and so he came down, and we had a great time. And then I was recruited by Four Seasons Hotel, so I went there. And also at the same time, I was consulting before the Four Seasons recruitment. I'd already started to consult for Sheraton, and they had a great young chef woman named Kathy Casey. She was on the cover of every food magazine at that time, because she was so dynamic. and I was the wine. I bought the wine for her restaurant at another hotel at Fuller's Restaurant in the Sheraton at the time in Seattle. It was great, and then I was hired by Four Seasons, and they hired me just as an employee, not as a manager or anything. But they paid me a lot more than the Red Cabbage where I'd worked, where we had the great wine program had paid, and they wanted me to develop theirs. So I was free still to consult for the Sheraton and still work at the Four Seasons because I wasn't a manager. If I had been a manager, I would have been prohibited from working for any competition. But then one day, the head of the operations for the whole company came to town, had dinner at Fuller's because they heard a lot of good things about Fuller's and the wine program there, and he wanted to check it out. And he saw my name on the menu of Fuller's as being the famous, Larry Stone, great sommelier, wine consultant for the wine buyer for the list. And he came back to the hotel immediately, saw me on the floor of the restaurant, which is the Georgian room, and said, "You're not allowed to work for other hotels." And I go, "No, I'm just a line employee. I'm an hourly employee. I'm allowed to do that in my spare time if it doesn't interfere with my duties here." And he said, "You are?" I go, "Yeah." And so from that point on, I was not only was I the manager, but they allowed me to end my contract with the other restaurant, but I could no longer do that again, with other properties. And I was corporate. I helped to develop the Four Seasons wine program out of Toronto. Helped develop that for the first time, and then I won the title while I was doing that. I won the title of best sommelier in the world, and I went to Charlie Trotter's. In Chicago, which at that time was a relatively unknown, locally recognized, but not known nationally really.
Right.
But people were starting to talk about it, and then I became.
And Chicago wasn't the restaurant scene then that it is today with Grant Achatz and all these other.
No. They came out of Charlie Trotter's. They were an outgrowth of that. The thing that was there that was good was some French restaurants. They had Les Nomades, which is still there, run by Mary Beth Liccione and Roland, who worked at Le Francais. And Le Francais was the mothership of all the great French chefs in the area. It was a Lyonnais chef, Jean Banchet, who was an amazing inspiration for American chefs at the time, someone like Jean-Louis Paladin a decade later. But he did old Lyonnais food with a lot of liaisons made with foie gras and an egg and very rich dishes, traditional, old style. Yeah. And the service was right out of Lyon, with the guéridon and the French waiters. And it was amazing. I ate there a few times before it changed hands. So, but what was different, the different departure was that when Charlie Trotter came on board, he rejected all that. He wanted to do what was new. He wanted to do what Freddy Girardet was doing in Switzerland. He wanted to do what was happening in Eugénie-les-Bains. He wanted to do what Marco Pierre White was doing in London. He wanted to do what Georges Blanc was doing with vegetables. So he was trying to start that in Chicago, of all places. Now, New York would have been a different story, but in Chicago it was unheard of.
Right.
So when he did this, it was, and he got me, because his dishes were a little wild and they didn't work with wine, but when he got together with me, the idea was to make dishes that worked as creative entities on their own right, very modern, very groundbreaking, but also would work with wine. Because he felt he needed the wine-loving community to come and support the restaurant, and that's how because he liked wine himself, so it was both personal as well as for a business reason, and because he had been shunned kind of by the wine community because they'd try dinners and he'd have all these wild things, and they said no, it doesn't work, and so I was the one, because of my background. Not only did I learn about wine, but because of my mother's farm background, and I should say the empathy or the sympathetic relationship between Romanian culture and French culture. My mother learned French and Latin when she was young, because Romanian is a Latin language. Many Romanian authors write in French. So Ionesco, the Rhinoceros, the avant-garde play of the 60s, he's Romanian. Paul Celan, the Nobel Prize-winning poet, he was Romanian. And so she learned French and Romanian. She taught French and Latin, actually. So I learned all the mother sauces. When I was starting to work in restaurants, when I was young, she taught me how to cook French things, pot au choux and that kind of thing. And when I was in the business, I said, "Oh, we have this thing with Béarnaise." She said, "Oh, you shouldn't eat much of that." I said, "I love it." I said, "Why?" She said, "It's like mayonnaise. It's an emulsion sauce." And she said, "These are all the emulsion sauces. They're Mornay, Choron, Béarnaise, Hollandaise, mayonnaise. They're not something you should take lightly, And I go like, "Oh yeah, they are." And then she said, "Yeah, all the stuff I taught you, all these are the families of sauces." So I got a book on the encyclopedia of culinary encyclopedia from Larousse, and I studied all the families of things, and to further my education.
So, you're a Charlie Trotter how long?
I was at Charlie for 5 years, and I went back though. After when you leave Charlie and he likes you and he thinks you're a valuable member of the team, he doesn't leave. You don't usually leave him on a very good note. He didn't like that I was leaving, and so he didn't talk to me. I wrote a book with him, and then I was taken off the authorship, and he had it be rewritten by Joe Spellman.
Because you left him.
Because I left him just as it was coming out. I was already in Galliprus, but I had to leave. My
Tough
mother.
guy that way.
What?
Wow, tough guy that way.
Well, I understand from a business point of view. I was opening another restaurant of my own in San Francisco.
Right, not competitive though.
Well, not with him in Chicago, but I was no longer with him. So he had my successor, Joe Spellman, redo and rewrite all the information on wine. And I understand that from a business point. I never held that against him. I understood that. I felt like, well, that's kind of. I wish he weren't that way. But that, many chefs and many operators, restaurateurs are that way. It was a purely business decision. And
I get it.
Yeah, and we remained. He didn't talk to me for a couple of years, but after that, I'm the only sommelier he kept inviting back year after year to all the events. When he had an anniversary or a special chef dinner, he would invite me back and pay me to come. And the last year of his business, I quit my other jobs and I went to Chicago, and I spent my entire year helping him wind down his restaurant and sell the wine cellar.
Right, I remember that, and sadly, he passed away as a young man.
He passed away a year later, but he had been sick already for 5 years. No one knew about it. It was a hidden secret from everybody except his wife. I found out about it because he and his wife discovered it one anniversary dinner when he disappeared for many hours, and we found him unconscious because he'd been jogging. He'd been jogging, and he had a stroke, basically, while jogging, because he had an aneurysm, a deep brain aneurysm, and that finally did him.
All right, so let's finish up on the work part. So you leave Charlie at some point, you go to San Francisco, interesting opportunity, open a restaurant with some cool people. Mm-hmm. To my recollection, it was a good restaurant scene, but not what it is now. So I think you were a little ahead of the curve?
We were ahead of the curve in the wine business. When I came, most chefs in the area said, we don't, this won't work. A sommelier, that's a key part of the wine. No, that's true. There were not that many master sommeliers either. You have to remember, I was the 9th, and in San Francisco they had quite a few. They had probably the biggest concentration of master sommeliers in America. At that time there were 4, I think. We had Emmanuel Camigi, we had Evan Goldstein, we had me, and then we had Mike Bonacorsi came a little bit later, and it was a very small scene. There was one more, Peter Granoff, who now has a retail shop, and that was it. And we had the biggest concentration. That was huge. That was like that was about half the master sommeliers in the country.
God.
Right there. But still, it was an unknown thing because Evan Goldstein was at the same restaurant as Peter Granoff. That was the Square One.
Right.
That his mother Joyce ran. And when I was brought in, that was a unique thing. People thought, well, that's an expense no one needs. The chef said, it won't work, no one cares. Wine, everyone has wine here, they bring their own wine. And then I started it, and we, like at Trotter's, 50% of our revenue came from wine. Charlie kept trying to make food more important than wine, but I kept matching it, so it was a competition. And and then
that's how important
same
a wine
thing.
program is.
And with Tracy, wine program is a good, if it's run well,
right,
and you have someone smart doing it and can sell it, and knows that, and it sells what they buy, not just keeps a collection of something that sits there, then it can work very well. And it can also be a bank account. If in bad times you don't buy wine, you just start depleting your cellar a little bit, and you can still make money and not have to spend more. But with in San Francisco, it worked out really well. And pretty soon I had all these young people coming to me: Rajat Parr, Sarah Floyd, people of that caliber. Christy Dufault came around. She was working at Gary Danko, but I helped Gary Danko out. I was with Gary when he started. I didn't ever work for him, but Renee Nicole Kubin, who worked at Trotter's, was one of his first and most lasting sommeliers. And so there was a big community, many of whom I helped mentor at one point or another, and it kept growing. And so out of that community, there's a ripple effect. More people got into wine. Today, there's so many people who want to be sommeliers because, to a certain extent, the profession has gotten notoriety, and fame. People are famous.
Restaurants used to be temples.
Yeah.
Chefs became rock stars.
Yeah.
Then sommeliers became notables.
Yeah, we're still not at the same level as chefs. Chefs.
No, I know.
Have first billing everywhere we go.
I think the age of social media, all these. All right. So
Lingua Franca. Are we going to talk about Lingua
Franca?
Franca?
I was just going to tell you
delight.
that. That's we don't have a lot of time, so we have to condense it. So you eventually leave Rubicon to start a winery, Lingua Franca. What year was that?
Well, the year that Charlie closed the restaurant, I had approached. I had already worked at a place. I ran Francis Ford Coppola's place. The partners, Francis Ford in my restaurant were Francis Ford Coppola, Robin Williams, and Robert De Niro.
Right.
And Francis hired me to be the gérant, sort of like a family representative and general manager of Rubicon Estate, which it was called at the time. Now it's renamed again back to the original name, Inglenook. And and I worked there until 10, and then in 10 I went to run the company that I helped her create in 1996 called Eveningland. And I based it on specifically the one that I had the most confidence in was the vineyard in Oregon, Seven Springs. And I said, you should just buy a piece of land near Seven Springs. Don't buy Seven Springs, buy a piece of land near there, as close as you can get to it, and start a vineyard of your own. Because I said, that place is magic.
That's what originally attracted you.
No, I'm from Seattle, so I knew the area from the 70s. I started going to Oregon in my childhood, and when the Oregon wine industry began, the best vineyard I ever identified in my career early on, after tasting wines from Oregon for 20 years, was in 1987, was the Seven Springs, the first release of Seven Springs wines as made by David Adelsheim at Adelsheim. And I thought it was the best wine he had ever made. And I said I thought it was the best wine I'd ever had from Oregon, and it wasn't his own vineyard. So when I started Eveningland as a proposal, I said, you want to start a winery based on Seven Springs. And when I was there, I looked across the street. It was an already established vineyard, but it was not in perfect condition because it had been established in stages in an early part. Across the street was an equally good property, and what I did was to buy it and develop it. And today, within...
What year was that?
That was in 2012. And today, we're all around the world. We're in 38 foreign markets, and the capital is the most important. Lingua Franca is in the best restaurants, 3-star restaurants in Paris and in Valence at Peak.
So let's talk about the wine. I mean, was it your intention to make a Burgundian-style wine? I mean, there's a connection to a relationship with Dominique Lafont.
Yes. The reason I wanted a French team, my winemaker is French. He worked at DRC and at Domaine du Jacques. Dominique Lafont for white wines. We have... Our vineyard manager is French. I had Mimi Castile for a while from Bethel Heights. She's the greatest thinker about terroir and about farming.
Ben, regenerative. Is that her son?
No, Ben is her cousin. Ben is the winemaker.
He was at I saw you at the wine and spirits symposium.
Yes, Ben is the winemaker, and that's her cousin.
Right.
So, but anyway, so she's a great thinker about farming, regenerative farming. So I wanted her, and we had her, and now we have. But the reason I wanted a French team is that I didn't want to make French wine. I'm not making Burgundian wine. I'm making Oregonian wine. I'm making wine of terroir.
That's how you answer the question.
Yes. Wine of terroir. My wine is to be a transparent expression of the exceptional terroir we have at Lingua Franca Estate and in the Old Amity Hills, and that part of the Old Amity Hills that stretches from Christum to me. Or maybe to Bethel Heights and me. It's the best part, I think, of Oregon because we have the Van Duzer corridor winds coming over the hill. It's like air conditioning all summer. We face due east. We have much longer summer hours of sunlight than anywhere in California, and the cool temperatures.
That, yeah.
So we can have a fully ripe wine at 12 or 12 and a half degrees, fully ripe. In fact, even sometimes too ripe at 12 and a half. And yet the alcohols are the flavor expression is amazing, and the colors are beautiful.
But here's another thing that's important. You observe some pretty strict practices in the vineyards and in the cellar. Talk to me about that quickly.
Well, we try to practice. We do practice a minimal of organic farming. We try to do biodynamic things as well, but we think it's thoughtful application of biodynamic principles, which includes some organic techniques. For example, it's not permitted under biodynamic farming to use cinnamon oil sprays for fungicides. So if you have mildew, you have to use sulfur. Sulfur is a very destructive compound. We'd rather use cinnamon oil. And cinnamon oil is not permitted, though, in biodynamic, but it is permitted in organic farming. So we vary what we do from any specific, regimented, approved.
You take best practices
best
on
practices.
the table, which are all good, but not always agree.
We do what we think is best for the vineyard, best for the fruit, best for the environment, most of all. So we don't apply any rodenticides. We let the hawks and the owls and snakes kill the rodents. We have rabbits. We don't, or quail. But we let the foxes eat it. We let the hawks eat it. It's an ecosystem, and we let it be strong. And around us, it creates more biodiversity, which creates very beautiful expression of terroir flavors coming from that specific site, rather than trying to just make it eradicate things and let it grow. That's not what it's about. It's about the things that come from the place.
Right. So we have to wrap up. But how many wines are you making?
Well, we sell in the market about 6 wines.
6 wines.
But we make at least 10 a year. But we sell a few of them only at the winery to people who buy online at linguafranca.wine, because
That's where if people want more information.
if they want more, they can get it.
LINGUA.
FRANCA.wine.
Wine.
Not .com. You
wine.
want dot wine.
All right.
I'm all about wine. I'm not about com.
Okay. Larry, we have to wrap up. I could sit here with you for hours. So look out for Larry's wines in Lingua Franca. I think you'll enjoy them a lot. Thank you to Larry Stone. Larry Stone is a master sommelier. He's the founder of Lingua Franca and obviously has a very colorful background. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation on Heritage Radio.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Larry.
This episode is brought to you by Levo, the world's most intelligent at-home infuser. It's super easy to use to make infusions for cooking, candies, cosmetics, and herbal medicines. When the box showed up, I was excited to try it out, as I've heard good things about the machine. It looks like a space-age coffee maker on the counter, and having it out makes me want to infuse everything. I've got plans for the hot peppers on my counter and the sage I picked from the garden before the first freeze last week, along with some other choice herbs and spices. I think everyone on my list is going to get infused oils this year. So far, I've used it for cannabis, basil, and orange peel infused oils and butter. The machine even has dry and activate functions for the highest potency and stability in your infusions, and you can connect through Wi-Fi to track your progress and record your recipes and share with the Levo community. Learn more at levooil.com. That's LEVOOIL.com.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey on the Heritage Radio Network. We are at the Naples Winter Wine Festival, benefiting the Naples Children and Education Foundation. Our guests are Jean-Nicolas Mayo from Domaine Mayo Camozet, and Nicolas-Jay, and Jay Boberg from Nicolas-Jay. Welcome to the Grape Nation, guys.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you for taking time out of, a pretty busy and good festival. So I have both of you together. I think the important thing is, Jay, I need you to tell me how you guys met and, how that became a wine thing.
We met in Philadelphia in 1987, so more than 30 years ago.
Do you remember what it was? Was it a dinner or a concert or something?
I remember exactly what it was. Jean-Nicolas was attending Penn, getting his master's degree in
energy economics.
And
Okay.
his classmate, or a student that was going through the master's program, is none other than my sister, Jill Boberg.
Okay.
And I was in Philadelphia with a band, and my sister said she was having some of her friends over for a dinner party, and she invited me to come over before the show, and I met Jean-Nicolas, and that was the start of our friendship.
So what were you doing at that point? You were finishing school.
Yes, I was finishing school. I knew I was...
Was this grad work or?
Yes.
Okay. Were you at university in France?
Yes, I was at business school in France. I knew, and I had studied also at Dijon University and done an enology degree. So I knew I was going to go back to the family domain. I was not sure this would be lasting and going on for that long. And both the business degree in Paris and that degree in Philadelphia was a kind of a backup plan. if you wish. So at the time, I was.
Back up to what? Like your father's going to throw you out or something?
Yeah, well, it's a good yes, it's a good family story actually, because we were in the position of really deciding within the family whether we would keep the domain or not, and we had come to the conclusion for various reasons that somebody at the family needed to be on the spot. And I was designated to be this one in the family, and
more family choice than your choice. Like
yes,
you're the guy.
Yes,
okay.
yes, and you're the guy. You know, you're the only one to do it, to be able to do it, etc., etc. But my father had said, well, you know, if you don't like it in Vaud-Normandais, if you don't like the business, I need you 2-3 years on the spot, and then we'll find a solution. But at least. The domain will will be started.
Right.
So that was the point I was at that moment.
Right. So when you returned after school, you jumped right into the business?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, beginning of '89. Yes.
That was '89?
Yes.
Wow. Going back a little. Now this guy has a wine background. You don't have a wine background, but you're now a winemaker and a wine guy. Talk to me a little about, you know, what you did. I mean, you're not doing it now, but for many years you were in the music business.
Yes.
Not just schlepping records.
No, I wasn't schlepping records. I started a record label called IRS Records with my partner Miles Copeland. And
now Miles is Stuart's brother?
Stuart Copeland's older brother,
right.
who was the manager of the police.
Right.
And I had worked with the police when I was in college. I was the concert booker at UCLA and had booked a lot of shows. And I met Miles and worked with the police. And then at one point he approached me about starting a label and some crazy offer like, I can't really pay you anything, but we'll co-own it. And I was either stupid enough or smart enough to think that that was a very good idea. And we launched IRS.
Idea-wise, I get that, but it's something you wanted to do. I mean,
I was a classical guitar player. I spent all my money on records and
so
stereo
music was
equipment.
definitely a direction that made sense.
Music was my passion. I mean, music was a huge passion. So I was fortunate in the sense that I was able to turn my avocation into a vocation. I never would have thought I would have actually been able to make a living doing it, but we signed Oingo Boingo and the Go-Go's, and then I signed REM, and we were off to the races.
What year did the label form?
1979.
79.
Our first release was the Buzzcocks, Singles
all
Going
good stuff.
Steady.
You haven't named a bad band. I mean, Danny, what's his name from Oingo
Danny
Boingo?
Elfman.
He's like the biggest music scorer for movies, right?
He is indeed.
It's crazy.
Very talented guy.
Yeah. So you do that for how long?
Well, I just want to point out, I was introduced to wine as well in college, and really became interested in wine. I mean, all the way through my music career, I was sort of known as the wine guy in the music industry. I used to...
But the touch point was in school, in college?
Yes.
Was it a friend or a group?
My roommate worked for a wine distributor in the summer. And
so he had access.
On a wine thing, and I saw food and wine together in a way that sort of the light bulb went off, and I loved to cook as it was, and that started a lifelong sort of passion for wine. And because I was traveling so much, and I had made some interesting friends early on, I met Kermit Lynch very early, I met a bunch of different people, this guy at the Burgundy shop in New York, and they would introduce me to different producers and different people, and then when I would travel with the bands or travel for work, I would go
wine.
see regions. So
right.
yeah, I've been to many different, Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany. I've been to a lot of different wine regions. And in fact, even within the music business, when we would do events for like radio programmers or for retailers, and we were of course competing against the Warners and the Sonys and
right.
the big companies, my angle for little IRS, the indie, was I would invite winemakers to be our guests, and we would do wine dinners. Jean-Nicolas actually even came over and attended one as our guest, and so all the radio station people would come to our wine dinner.
Because it was unique,
because
cool.
It was unique and cool. And
but
then,
did people appreciate it?
Absolutely.
I mean, they knew that you were putting an effort in and bringing guys like, hey, these guys have great wine.
There's a shocking amount of overflow or interaction between music and arts people and wine people. And actually, to go to your second part of your question, when Jean-Nicolas and I embarked upon this, and I started actually being in the wine business versus being a wine guy and buying wine and drinking wine and talking about wine, one of the things I noticed was how similar the businesses are, or at least were. Music is no longer a physical product, it's a digital product, but back when you were selling music through record stores and you had distributors in each state and each country, and you were dependent upon radio programmers to play your records on the radio, not too dissimilar than being dependent on sommeliers putting your wine on the wine list. It's a similar
setup.
And getting your wine into wine shops and
so forth. It's a good point, because you saw the business change like nothing else. Wine really hasn't changed much.
No, I hope it doesn't go digital.
No, it's
going to be tough.
When you were in Philly and met Jean-Nicolas, did you realize, like, this guy's from, a great French Burgundy family?
Yes, I didn't. I had I believe I'd had a male wine before. I think Kermit or Martine. Somebody turned me on to the domain, and so I knew of it. But I honestly really couldn't afford those wines. But Henri Jayer was making the wines,
and I knew
about
a lot cheaper then. Well, you'll tell me a little about
yes,
Jayer and the effect that he has. So you're part of this, legacy. I mean,
yes.
I can't. Compliment or give enough high praise. I mean, it's one of the great Burgundy houses, truly one of the more celebrated wines. I'm just curious why you decided to branch out and why Oregon. Some of it's obvious, because Pinot, Burgundy and all that, but was Jay the influence or?
Yes, of course. Yes, I think that was an opportunity I thought I could not miss. Of course, I was cautious at first because I really wanted to capitalize on my experience and with the reputation of the domain. I wanted to make sure we could make great wine. But I guess this is something I had, a kind of yearning I had in me, and Burgundy. It's difficult to expand in Burgundy because when we restarted our family domain, we had a lot of investments to do. So
wait, back up for a second. Why do you have to restart? I mean, what happened that there was that change or prompted that?
Well, my father inherited the domain from the Camuset family in 1959. Back then, it was a domain that was organized with tenants. The Camuset family was not directly working on the domain. And my father kept that arrangement. He had a career in Paris, and that was very practical for him. And that was part of the decision process of me going back to the domain, because that arrangement was becoming a little bit more fragile in the 80s. And so we decided we would take over progressively as our tenants retired.
So you outright
Yes.
owned it or controlled it?
Yes, yes.
How long of a process was that?
That was arguably a 20-year process, but
Wow.
that was very. In the first 6-7 years, that was very quick. But then we had one tenant who was a bit younger than the others and lasted until 2008.
Wow.
So we had a lot of investment to do, and then not necessarily a lot of money to invest in buying vineyards. I had started also a negociant business in Burgundy in '99. That is, we were buying grapes.
You could go wherever you want.
Yes,
to put together
yes.
versus your own properties.
Yes, but that to make that development properly, I thought I came to the conclusion it had to be kept relatively small and relatively modest, because if you want to do that properly in the same spirit as you grow grapes in your own domain, this is the conclusion I came to. So basically, growing in Burgundy, if you wanted to maintain the quality, was going to be very slow. So I had this envy, this yearning in me to start something else. And
But Oregon, because it made sense? Were you looking at other?
yes, Oregon because it made sense, and because I had this opportunity with Jay.
Jay, was Oregon,
Yes.
were you open with Jean-Nicolas as to where, or it kind of
No.
pointed to Oregon?
Oregon was the place that I felt that at least we could make the wine that I wanted to drink. I thought that California was going to be more challenging, not only from a climate standpoint and the type of wines, because there are some areas of California where you
Yes.
can make a cool climate.
Sonoma Coast, maybe.
But few. But also there were the economics. And the economics in California are extremely
Property-wise,
challenging.
just to
Costs,
acquire? Yeah.
everything, the vineyards, everything. And, people joke with me all the time, how do you get a small fortune, start out with a large
Right.
fortune and go in the
How do you
wine
make
business?
$1 million in wine, start with 5?
Right, exactly. And so I certainly didn't want to be that guy, and Jean-Nicolas had no interest in being that guy. And so Oregon made sense not only from, first and foremost, was we felt we could make a world-class wine there once we'd done the research. Secondly, is that you had a community that was up and coming and was doing, we thought, all the right things in terms with
Yes.
Pinot Camp
Yes.
and IPNC and very collaborative.
What year is this, when you start literally roaming the
2011,
land?
2012.
Okay, so 7 years ago. 8 years ago, maybe longer.
Yeah, 8, 9.
But tell me, go back for a second. Who really instigated the idea of doing a wine and a label? Was it you to him, let's do this? Was it you, Jay, to Jean-Nicolas? Or was
Well,
it you?
the project evolved somewhat. At first, it was there was a question of buying a label. You were involved in a project that was going a much bigger project. Initially, that was to buy an existing label, and that did not work. And and we were at this point both a little frustrated. And said, we had studied, and so Jay said, well, we could do that ourselves. We don't really need, after all, to have an existing label. We could start our own label. So that changed a lot the picture, and of course that was much more modest.
But in retrospect,
was the right thing
it's a
to
better
do. Yes.
place
Yes.
where you want
Yes.
it. I mean, you
Yes.
build it from the ground up,
Yes.
the vision, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Versus-
And also, it's very true to us. I mean, we've been able to start from scratch, which, of course, has its challenges.
Sure.
But it also allows us to have the story be authentic and have it be the way that we want, which now,
Exactly,
we
yes.
started out, now the evolution from the first vintage to now having 6 vintages in, and we just, you may or may not know, but we bought a piece of property that has 52 acres that we're going to be able to plant.
Where?
And a barn that we're in
What
the process
part
right
of-
now of renovating into a production facility in the Dundee Hills.
So you have vines in Dundee, and you're going to put a winery there.
We've been buying fruit in Dundee. We don't own it.
Okay.
But we're going to start planting our own vineyard in Dundee as well.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a big evolution for us. I mean, if you think 2014, we made less than 2,000 cases, and we were sourcing the fruit, but then we bought our first vineyard, Bishop Creek, which was one of the vineyards that we were coveting, and that came up for sale. And now, last year, at the end of last year, we bought a piece of land where we can now build our winery and plant vineyards as well.
So
It's going to be very exciting because we've been working with existing vineyards so far, and which are great, have displayed great character, but starting really from scratch is another adventure that is going to be absolutely thrilling.
So the objective is your own vineyards.
Yes, I think we'll continue to buy
Yes.
fruit.
You'll do
from,
both.
We have long-term relationships with
And
these
you're happy
farmers,
with
and
the
we love
practices
the
and
vineyards.
the,
Yes,
the,
I'm happy.
the product and all.
Yes, exactly.
I
And
mean,
it's-
you know what you want.
Well, I think we've become hooked to some of these vineyards,
Yeah.
and we love the wine.
Well, let's talk about the wine. When you decided to make a wine, do you naturally or typically say this is going to be a Burgundian wine, or you have to look at the site and the terroir and make a wine that expresses that, or both? I mean, what was the vision of the type of wine? And that's a question for both of you, because obviously, Jay, you too, here's what I think I'd like to make too.
I'm perhaps going to disappoint you, but there was no vision.
Okay.
At first.
No,
There
that
was
makes me feel good, because
Yeah.
we're not always all prepared, right?
No, there was no vision. There was really the idea of being ready to watch what would come from these vineyards and see what would be the outcome. I was not going. I was certainly not coming to Oregon saying, "Well, I want to make Burgundy in Oregon." This would have been a failure from the start,
And not possible.
and not possible. So.
So you carried none of the Jair philosophy into the wine?
I do. It's absolutely. It's the canvas of techniques are the same in Burgundy and Oregon, but I didn't know exactly what to expect, and I really let within that canvas. I really let the vineyards express themselves, and hoped. That it would come up with things I liked and that people would like to. But I'm not really crafting a wine in a certain direction. I'm doing the wine and see how it goes and say, well, it's great. We have a great structure there in a great natural structure. That would be the Bishop Creek, for example. Let's see how we can fine tune that character with the Dundee Hills.
So it's a blank canvas in a way. It's
Yes.
like, let's look at what's here and we'll
Yes.
make the wine based on.
Yes, and we'll take what comes from the vineyard, hope that it's great, and we've come across great outcomes from time to time, and refine and work and see how we can even do better afterwards.
I think just to expand on that a bit, what you're really asking, Sam, we didn't go into it to make a particular product, and certainly there are a lot of wines in the
And you had a
marketplace.
template of some sort if you wanted,
Well,
or the
what we had-
expertise.
what we had is the expertise.
Right.
I mean, I had a partner who is, one of the great makers of Pinot Noir in the world, and as he said, I mean, we went into it seeing what the vineyards offered, but I think it's important to know that we had drank a lot of wine together, and when he would come to California to do his marketing for Mayo Camazé, he would stay with me. I got to be his +1 at dinners he would go to and so forth, and so
It's a good
he
one.
knew my palate. And we like the same things. I
Right.
mean, in terms
Yes.
of the style of wine, we both have the same goals. And I think when people ask me the question that you did, well, so what kind of wine were you trying to make? And the answer is we were trying to make a wine that we wanted to drink.
And you were at the point where you know each other so well, it kind of was a natural.
We have very similar taste. I mean,
Yes,
I think we're
yes,
shooting
yes.
for the same things. If you put 5 wines on the table and had us all drink them, had each of us drink them, we would probably end up picking the
Right.
same wines that we like. I mean, we have very similar taste, and I think it's
And
important.
it's all still working.
Yes.
You're not.
Yes.
Your vision is shared still,
Yes,
and
no,
you're
no,
happy with the current
I
progress.
know his tastes better now.
Okay,
and,
well that's an evolution
yes,
too.
yes.
Personality, taste, all of that stuff. You mentioned different things, but I want to tie it together a little. Let's talk about the wine specifically. I mean, are you making 4 wines, or how many?
Yes,
Four
four
sites, or
Yes, we make 3 single vineyards.
let's talk about
Yes.
tick them off. So, what are the vineyards?
So we have our estate vineyard, Bishop Creek, in Yamel Carlton. We have the Nisa vineyard in the Dundee Hills and Momtazi Vineyard in McMinnville. We also make a blend of all the wines we buy.
Of those 3 sites?
Of those,
or whatever you
And
decide you
and
want.
3 sites plus
5 others.
5 others.
We have 8 vineyards altogether for which we source fruit.
And I'm confused, but that's me. There are 3 single vineyard designates?
Yes.
Yes.
The way it worked is that our focus was to work a blend, to really to launch the brand, to launch the style of the wine, and work really a blend that would really represent the spirit of the Willamette Valley. But during that process, I came through really wines which I thought were remarkable, had great character, and that I really also wanted to show. And this is how we decided we would show, we'd carve a small piece of these 3 vineyards to really show them and show the diversity of style and how great and different the offerings
And show
were.
the elements of the Willamette Valley. So our Willamette Valley is really meant to be, those 8 vineyards were the result of what we thought were the best representation, the finest sites, the finest fruit, and the idea was to blend them together in a way that created this sort of penultimate expression of the vintage. So it's slightly different amounts of each vineyard from vintage to vintage to vintage, but the same vineyards.
Right.
And so Jean-Nicolas is able to blend and sort of adjust the vintage, adjust the wine for each vintage to really, in theory, come up with the best wine for the Willamette Valley.
It's interesting that you're able to take advantage of different sites. I mean,
Yes.
we know great wineries there that are just in one region. How do we get the wines? I've actually seen them in good stores.
Yes, we're in now about 15 states.
Okay.
We're also available through our website, and we are able to ship to all but maybe 4 or 5 states.
Tell me the website.
The website is www.Nicolas-Jay.
Nicolas.
No H.
Did I say H?
No, I know.
Oh.
I'm saying that because people always in America,
Right.
Nicolas is with an H.
Dash.
It's Nicolas-Jay.com.
Right. So you can go there. You
And
can
we're in a
learn
lot
more.
of great restaurants. I mean, we've had
That's
fantastic-
important, right? I think
Yeah.
the exposure.
Yes.
It's always a great
We
thing.
need
Everything
it.
from-
We need it. Yes.
Yeah, really wonderful restaurants.
Great. I could sit here all day, talk about the family business, talk about the record business,
Us
but we
too.
got to wrap
Us
up.
too. Yes,
I know
us
you have
too.
a busy day today. I want to thank Jean-Nicolas-Jay and Jay Boberg, their project together, and you got a little insight into it, is Nicolas-Jay. It's a Oregon Pinot Noir, and we talked about how you can get it. Thank you guys for spending some time with us. Continued luck, good luck,
Thanks
and
a lot.
success with the
Yes,
winery.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sam.
I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. And thanks for listening.